2, 1. We always knew the summer holidays were near when we went on the annual school trip to Galway by train. Now, the one instruction I remember was, and I quote, "Don't put your head out of the window for fear of getting soot in your eyes." Well, folks, it's the Hawk at Large here for Athlone Radio on 102.1 FM, and you're welcome. Today we recall some memories of the steam locomotive era with old employees. And with me are Jimmy Healy,
Michael O'Connell,
Ty Curley, Eamon Lacken, and Johnny Burke. And you're all very welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I suppose seniority rules in a situation like this. Would that be right, lads? So in that event, I would have to go directly to Jimmy Healy. Jimmy, what year did you join? Was it CIE or what?
It is GSR, Midland Race Southern Railway. The 9th of April 1936, and I retired in October 1985 with 49 and a half years and 9 days service.
Excellent. Tell me something, this is one for you. What was your first week's wages?
The big sum I got was 21 and 9pence. I was too young to pay insurance, and there was 7.5% cut on wages, so I had 6pence an hour for a 48-hour week, totalling 21 and 9pence weekly.
My God, how about that? Rest on that for a while. Michael O'Connell, when did you join?
1945, and it was Midland Great Western that time, and then it changed to CIE shortly afterwards.
Yeah. So what did you go in as? Do you know, what was your first job?
Went in as a cleaner. We were cleaners, cleaning the locomotives.
Well, was that ultimately to be a fireman and then a driver? Was that the idea?
That was the bottom rung of the ladder, and you worked your way up after that as the vacancies occurred. Yeah. And how you got on after that was up to yourself too. You know.
Now, you fellas must have went all around the country, or was there a specific route for you?
Oh no, we were cleaners. We were in the local shed just cleaning engines. When you became a fireman and a driver, then you worked routes on the Midland Great Western or CIE system as it became then. And that was mostly the Western, the Northwestern, Dublin and some of the southern routes, but they were limited.
Well done. Ty Curley. Ty, you saw aspects as well because you were also on the old football team with CIE.
That's right, yeah.
Any memories of that?
I have. I got my ribs broke by one of themselves as well.
Who was that?
Oh, no.
Well, his father, his brother, they were all on the railway. It was Butch Sullivan, if you ever remember.
I remember Butch well. Yeah. And what year did you go on, Ty?
I joined in 1946, and as cleaners that time, we were only temporary. We were let go every year after the beat season, and brought back again the next year. That happened for 4 or 5 years, until eventually I was appointed in 1950.
So when you joined earlier on as a cleaner, in 1950, was it?
I was appointed in 1950.
1950. So what was your wages, you say? Can you remember your first week's wages?
£2.13.
Good God. Yeah.
And I got married in 1952 at £4.14. I couldn't buy socks at the time.
So when did you pack up? When did you leave?
Well,
or when were you retired, actually?
1993. September.
Here, Malakin, what are your earliest memories of, once again, was it CIE or what?
I joined the railway in 1939. I suppose it was no accident. My father was a driver and my grandfather worked in the Killala branch, and my own father joined the railway in Ballina in 1909 and transferred to Athlone in 1913. So I suppose the fact that I followed on was no accident. I got 6 weeks' work. I left technical school in 1939 from October to December, and that was the first time I was in a loco shed. There was 22 cleaners there at the time, and I suppose there was 35 engines in Athlone in those days. They had a big staff, and nearly 100 worked in the shed then. When I enjoyed the railway, trains used to run with to say with monotonous regularity. They were always on time, but then by 1941 or 2, when the war started and the coal stocks dried up, well, the trains, as they say, ran out of path, and train that should be in Athlone in 2 hours, might be 6 hours coming to Athlone. So when I joined the rail, I was appointed cleaner in 1940, 15th of April, and my wages then was 25 shillings a week. I take home of a pound and 10 pence. And they were my earliest memories.
Well done. And finally, Johnny Burke. Well, Johnny, I suppose, like the lads, you saw the two innings. You saw the old steam and the diesel electric, if that's what you call it. But when did you join?
I joined the 24th of June 1946 with Michael O'Connell, and I became senior to him just because I was that bit older than him. And my experience was, it was during the time of the trams in Dublin, and when we went up to do our examination, after we'd done our examination, I had the pleasure of being carried across fire down O'Connell Street. So after that then, we started cleaning in Athlone, and you were appointed a cleaner. We were nearly appointed a cleaner straight away because there was a shortage of staff. And there were short of firemen at the time, and I had the privilege and the honour of being passed for spare fireman by Eamon's father, who was an acting locomotive inspector at the time. And due to the regulations that was in being at the time, you were not allowed to fire a locomotive outside the shed limits, outside the yard limits, until you became the age of 18. So I had the pleasure of working with some great drivers, John Klein's father, Lord rest of him, Paddy McCann's father, and a whole lot of drivers of that age group.
Well done, Johnny. Well, that's actually the introduction, lads. That's sort of the formalities got over with. If you've just joined us out there, I'm with Jimmy Healy, Michael O'Connell, and with Ty Curley, Eamon Lacken, and Johnny Burke, and we're all sort of reminiscent the era of steam. We're going to take a little break here and come back and join us for part two. Yeah, so you're very welcome back to part two. It's the Hawk at Large here for Radio Athlone 102.1. If you've just joined, and we're reminiscing with old friends here, the steam locomotive era in Athlone. Jimmy Healy, you were saying off here that all belonged to you were on the railway.
Yes, I was in the secondary school and I had to leave it to go in when my father had an untimely death. And the first job, as I said, I was a cleaner for 21 and 9 pence weekly. And one of the duties was to be a call driver or fireman for work. And it might be half a mile of a distance, but you might afford them at the one time to call.
Michael O'Connell, I can't call you. We all know what call girls were. What were call boys like?
Well, they didn't wear skirts anyway, like the call girls. No, it was a job you got at night, especially between 12 and 8 in the morning. And you had to have a bicycle. If not, you had to run. And you had to go to various streets, and you went in and got a list off the night foreman, whoever he be. I remember Johnny Butler, and do you remember Joe, the Dublin man, the Stony Batham man, Joe Everard? And off you'd go with your list of addresses, and if you were lucky, you had a torch. If not, you had to light matches and look at door numbers, and sometimes you...
Well, was that an account of some guy wouldn't show up?
No, that was the rule. They had to be called to make sure they were in. You're throwing pebbles up at bedroom windows, and you're getting abused because you're knocking at the wrong door, and you took your chances, and hoped you wouldn't meet anything on the way back at night that would take you on as well. So it was good fun, but dangerous.
Ty, what about the dormitories? When you went away and you stayed away, where did you stay?
Well, there weren't dormitories in every town that all the crews went to. There were places where people took in railwaymen at the time on a very normal charge. Claremorris, Westport, Ballinrobe. Well, and then when you'd go away on fairs, you'd have what they call a sleeping car. That was
fair days? No?
Fair days, yeah.
Right, okay, yeah.
And the company supplied a sleeping car.
Yeah.
I remember one, I suppose all the lads remember it very well. 108 was the number. And there was 4 bunks in each section. There was about 6 sections. And 4 men sleeping together in a small little area. It wasn't 4 to 5 foot wide.
And could you get to bed late at night? Is that the idea? Could you get to bed?
Well, any time when your duties were finished.
But I mean, could you go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Oh, yeah, whenever you were finished.
Oh, yeah, whenever your duties were finished, yeah.
And what did you do for meals? Did you make your own breakfast?
Yeah, you cooked your own. You cooked your own meals.
Yeah, yeah.
And when the driver and fireman came in, the cleaner had to get out because he was a junior man. Let him have his meals.
Oh, yeah.
Well done. Yeah, well done, Ty. Eamon, well, it's not technicalities. What about dangers of the railway? We'll say derailments or signal failures.
Well, from day one, you were advised to be very, very careful because you were now working with wheels and rotating wheels. And you always had to be very sharp. And unfortunately, few people were unfortunate over the years and suffered as a loss of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yes, there were many accidents, but then young people were alert from day one. And I suppose there was an element of danger all the time, the fact that you worked with wheels and trains. It was part and parcel of the hazard of the job.
Well done. Johnny, what about yourself? Can you remember pre-corridor carriages? In other words, when you couldn't walk from one carriage to the other?
Well, there was two different types of carriages out at that time. There was carriages that you just got into this compartment and until you arrived at your destination, that's where you sat.
Yes.
There was no such thing as toilets on them particular carriages. Then other rolling stock came out at the time, which was a corridor at the side with compartments down along the carriages.
Yeah.
And they were the luxurious carriages of their day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I remember going to excursions to go, and you get into those coaches, and there's about a bench each side, and when you got into the coach, that's where you stayed at your arrived in Galway, or Bray, or wherever the excursions was. And the likes of Tullamore and Clara, they were great towns for organising excursions, and also Limerick. There used to be massive excursions to Limerick, from Limerick to Galway. It's not a Herman. And Galway and Clara, good buddies in Clara. And also, I remember on one occasion during the steam days, if I can relate, I think Michael and Ty were working in Claremorris that Sunday, when the Pioneers held a big day in Knock. And I think there was 26 excursions that day. And then there was another big day in Crow Park, wasn't there, for some of the the Pioneers, wasn't it, Jimmy? Pioneer Rally.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was some wonderful days where work was done.
Well done,
yeah.
There was a big one.
Do you know there must have been great affinity between all railwaymen? Or were the drivers a sect unto themselves, lads? Or were they not? Was it all part of the railwaymen?
They were all intermarried, you see.
Yes.
The drivers' daughters or firemen's daughters married each other.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
a lot of them. There was a family affair in a lot of instances.
Yeah. Off here today, I was asking some of the lads about on the engine, on the old engine. We saying of a bitter cold night in the winter. Was it cold on the engine?
Not to a fireman, but the driver would be frozen.
Is that because the fireman did all the work?
Yeah, he'd do all the work.
Well, more or less, he had to be on the move. The other fella sat the other side, and if he was a good one, he'd smile at you and nod. But if he was a contrary one, he just looked and grunted, and you turned your back and kept bending it and shoving like hell, and that was it.
Ty, what was it like to do? You weren't there in the war years as such, were you?
No, just that.
At the end, so coal was still a bit scarce then, wasn't it? Oh.
Just no difference in it and clear of the field.
Relating stories from Jimmy Healy being a senior man in Eamon Lacken, we heard about what they called a duff. It was just like clay, as you remarked there a few minutes ago. It's just impossible. It just wouldn't light, that was all.
And it was a hard job to get the thing.
Well, it was, yeah, according to the stories from the older generation.
Yeah.
But in my time, the coal was fairly good. They got a consignment from America, and sure, it was marvellous at the time. Only awful smoke came out. The country people were complaining about cows getting sick in the fields and the black smoke. But then camaraderie was great.
Great.
One old-timers used to say, the money was small, but the laughs were great.
Very good, very good. Well, it's the same. I was on last week about Gentex, and the same question came up again, and I'm going to directly relate it to the railway, and especially to the engine drivers and the firemen. Was it an unhealthy job?
Oh, I'd say it was a very, very healthy job. The fact you were out in the open and you were exercising yourself. But during the war years, I'm speaking about between 40 and 45, when the good coal dried up and you were trying to operate, what they call during the emergency, but you tried to burn anything, turf, sticks, timber of any kind. And then we got pitch, and then somebody in Westport came up with briquettes. but the briquettes were made up of sand and cement and a sprinkling of pitch, so much so that you had no steam pressure, and the firebox was full of sand. So they tried everything during the war years. Yes, it was a healthy job, but again, it was a hungry job, because sometimes you spend maybe 10 to 12 hours on the footplate between Athlone and Dublin. So it was a tough job during the war years.
Excellent. Well done. What we'll do is we'll just take another break now, commercial break, and then we'll see a part 3. I think we're going back to part 3. And if you're listening out there, well, I'm with, said Eamon Lacken, I'm with Tigler Curley, Mickey O'Connell, Jimmy Healy, and Johnny Burke, and we're talking about old times on the railway. See you for part 3. So you're very, very welcome back. It's the Hawk at Large here, and everybody knows what we're on about. Johnny, you were saying off air there was no speedometers on the engine.
No, that was a fact on the steam engines. Of course, the steam engines were over 100 years old, and they were marvellous machines altogether, because they'd nearly go half broken down, and some of